do number 14 because that's a 0.
Well, this is number 14. We're going to do the evens together. Boys in the back of the room. It's time to be quiet. Okay.
Oh, I'm dumb. Oh, wow.
That's right.
We know.
Number 14, the first thing we wanted to do is recognize that this is a line. And then we want to get y on, you don't have to have it on that side, but that's how I did it. Okay, I moved my y term over to the left, and I moved the 3, which is the constant, over to the right by doing the opposite of whatever they were. I had to subtract 3 from both sides, add 3y to both sides. And then I needed to divide everything by a positive 3. Okay, which gave you this. Y is greater than 1/3 x minus 1. Now, we're going to graph this line. We need to know where to start. So we start with our y-intercept, which is the constant, -1. Then we need to know how to move to find the next point. So we look at our slope, which was 1/3. And that means that we're moving up 1 and to the right 3 from our starting point. Then we needed to know what type of line to draw through those 2 points. Because it was greater than or equal to, we drew a solid line through the 2 points. And then we needed to know which direction to shade. And if you recall yesterday, I actually drew some little people like they're sitting on a seesaw. Remember, your head is always facing the sky when you're on a seesaw. Your feet are facing the ground. Never draw your people upside down. And we wanted to shade above the line, so the sky. Okay? And so here was the answer or the graph for number 14. Do not forget, do not forget to label your points. The 2 points we had drawn were at 0, -1, and 3, 0. It was a solid line, and we shaded above. That was number 14. Number 16, kind of some messy shading here. I'm going to graph it again, but let's look at it. Okay, 16 was written backwards, but that's okay. We don't have to rearrange it because y is already by itself. You just read from the direction of y. This reads y is greater than or equal to, which means my shading goes up. And because it was equal to, my line is solid, okay? On this side, which is normally on the other side, I have a slope of 1 and a y-intercept of -5. So if we were going to graph this line, we start at -5. Our slope was to go up 1 and to the right 1, which puts me at 1, -4. I was to draw a solid line through those points and shade above the line, which if you imagine your people sitting there, your shading went in this direction. Okay? You may not want to shade in that direction because then it's confusing which one is the line. You may want to do this instead. So you don't get your shading in your line that you graphed confused. Number 18, we had to rearrange the equation to make it easier to graph. Okay, so the first thing we did was add 2 to both sides, and we're done. Here's the equation of our line. Our line crosses the y-axis at +2, has a slope of 3/1. It's a broken line. Why is it broken? Because it is not equal to. It simply says greater than. And the shading goes below the line. All right, so we start at our y-intercept, which is 0, 2. We move up 3 units into the right 1, which puts us at 1, 5. We draw a broken line through those 2 points. And if you imagine your people sitting on the seesaw, we want to shade where their feet would be dangling, which would be this region down here. Confused with the seesaw and the dangly feet? Okay. All right. I said sometimes it's hard to see what's up and what's down. So if you imagine that the point where it's crossing here is the fulcrum of a seesaw, like where it's stuck in the ground, and there's some children on the seesaw. Okay? Children will not be on a seesaw like this, will they? I hope not. Okay? So if you just imagine that there's someone sitting on the edges of the seesaw, above would be the sky, which is above their head, and below would be where their feet are. So if we're shading below, we're shading where their feet are. Okay, number 20. There was no x term, which means that that's a horizontal line. Y equals 3, y is always 3. It was a broken line through 3 on the y-axis, and our shading was below the line, which would be where their feet are located. Okay, so that was number 20. Number 22, we had to rearrange the equation. So the first thing I did was get my x and my plus 3 over to the other side by subtracting both of them. Then I had to divide all 3 terms by a negative 6. Well, if you divide both sides by a negative, what happens to the inequality symbol? It switches. So my less than then, my greater than became less than, and I was left with y equals 1/6 x plus 1/2. So this line starts at positive 1/2, has a slope of 1/6. It was broken because it did not say equal to, and we were to shade below the line because it says less than. All right, well, if you start at positive 1/2 on the y-axis, that's where you are. If you move up 1 unit from 1/2, what did you move up to? 1 and 1/2. We were at 1/2, we moved up 1, okay? And then we moved across 6. So this point here was 6, 1 and 1/2. We had a broken line, and we shaded below the line. Number 24, very simple. Your y-intercept was equal to -5. Your slope was positive 1/2. It was a solid line, and the shading was above the line. Okay, then we had our absolute value problems. Okay. First off, you should know what the graph is going to look like when there are absolute value brackets present. It should look like a V. Okay? The X must be in the absolute value brackets. Just make that straight. What am I talking? Suppose you just had this. If there is no X, that's referring to a what kind of line? A horizontal line. Where it's a horizontal line and it's above 2. Okay? Make sure I clarify that. Okay, so on this one, we have to look at changes being made to the absolute value function. Shifts in the graph are identified by adding or subtracting something to x inside, or by adding or subtracting a constant outside. Is either one of those things happening? So there's no shift taking place. Flipping the absolute value graph is signified by a negative in front. Is that happening? No. Okay, and then yesterday we learned that whether the 4 is in front of these brackets or right in front of the x, it still represents your what? Your slope. So the slope of this thing is 4/1. It's broken